Indianapolis, as well as Turin. But let's take a deeper look into the team that Emilio Forbes has brought.
One of the things that jumps out to me quickly are these speed boosting stat alignments. We saw very much Pokemon slowing down in the first couple of tournaments on Pokemon Champions, but Garchomp and Floette both here with speed boosting alignments means that they're going to be threatening to outspeed a bunch of the stuff on Marco's side. But otherwise, this looks like a pretty aggressive Charizard team. Has Whimsicott for Tailwind support, can pump out a bunch of damage. Basculegion, always present in Pokemon Champions, one of the most used Pokemon. It can also put out a ton of damage.
We're also taking a look at the King Gambit, and we're seeing a difference in the berry. Usually a Chople Berry on this King Gambit.
Yeah, for those of you who can't recognize your berry sprites, that's an Aqua Berry, so going to be fire resistant. Pretty helpful against Marco's team. There's no fighting offense on the other side, but there's definitely plenty of fire offense from Charizard. So the Aqua Berry can let you take a hit and respond back with Kowtow Cleave, and then maybe threaten a KO with Sucker Punch. Also helpful because there's Protect dropped here. King Gambit, really a Pokemon that struggles in this format with which four moves to use. You're usually picking between Iron Head and Low Kick. In this case, picking both at the cost of Protect.
You also have a Whimsicott. Whimsicott can be one of the peskiest Pokemon in the format. Things like Tailwind and the Prankster ability means that you get to use that right away. Give your side speed control. But you also have moves like Encore, which if you fake out or you protect in front of that Pokemon, or even try to go for setup, you might be a little sad.
You might be in trouble. Also, the Focus Sash indication is a more offensive Whimsicott, means it can actually put out damage with Moonblast. That might be a threat to the Garchomp on the other side, especially because, as we'll see in a second, Marco's Garchomp also opting for a speed boosting alignment that might indicate it is a little bit less bulky.
We're going to see Jolly alignment on the Aerodactyl as well, so that's going to be speed boosting natures for both of those physical attackers. Tailwind's still available, but it's not going to be Prankster, so Aerodactyl's just going to use its natural speed if it wants to set up that support.
Of course, Pokemon that jumps out here is the Frigoraph, offers a Trick Room mode as well to the team. Brave Incineroar is a speed dropping alignment, so you can see there's some investment to the Trick Room mode there. And then Charcoal as well on Incineroar. So if you can get in the sun with Trick Room up, those Flare Blitzes suddenly really threaten to hurt. Incineroar, not just a utility piece here, can pump out some damage. And then Sylveon, a lot of times we see Charizard paired with Floette, like on the other side. In this case, instead of a secondary Mega, you just have Sylveon, meaning you can bring them both together if you want both the Fairy offense and Charizard.
Yeah, because Mega Floette, the downside is that it doesn't do very much if it's not Mega Evolved, so it feels like you really do have to expend that resource, but that means that that's not available for your Charizard. So there is definitely a double-edged sword here. Bringing one Mega Evolution for Marco Silva, you kind of know exactly what he's going to be bringing, but you do have the ability to have that Fairy damage alongside of it without that Mega.
Right, you still have to be prepared for Fairy offense, even though you know it is going to be Mega Charizard on the other side. One more call out here, Garchomp has no Rock Slide, so not able to threaten the Charizard on the other side as significantly, but does have the Soft Sand, so it's giving a 20% boost to both of those ground moves, both Stomping Tantrum and Earthquake.
But don't worry, because the Aerodactyl has the Rock Slide for it, so there's still going to be some Rock-type offense available. But let's get into game number 1 between Emilio Forbes and Marco Silva to kick off the Pokemon North America International Championships. Marco has that Aerodactyl and the Charizard, so 2 flying types on the field, and the Floette and Whimsicott is going to be the Pokemon of choice for Emilio.
So when Whimsicott and Aerodactyl hit the field opposite each other, immediately that's normally some advantage over to the Whimsicott side. Emilio can click Tailwind, and then Floette will move before either the Aerodactyl or the Charizard does. But in this case, isn't actually threatening a KO. You can put out a lot of damage, but then that damage is just going to come back right back. If you take a Rock Slide and a Heat Wave with Floette and Whimsicott, they're both just going to go down. So this is not an easy situation to just click Tailwind and attack. Immediately, Emilio has to be thinking about how to pivot out of it.
And the Floette doesn't actually have Calm Mind, something that would have been nice to be able to go for like a speed increase, as well as having that setup on the Floette, so it's not going to take as much damage from something like a Heat Wave. So there's going to be a switch out. Floette leaves the field. Garchomp comes in to take its place, and we see the first Mega Evolution of the tournament go over to Charizard Y.
Immediately trying to get the offense ready. The sun is going to start, and damage is coming.
Whimsicott protects itself, does not want to take any damage on this turn, especially knowing that it's going to be threatened by a knockout. But the Tailwind from the Aerodactyl is going to kind of punish this passive play. You have the Heat Wave come out here from the Charizard, kind of connect onto the Garchomp, and at least deal a little bit of damage. That Sun is going to boost that up so much, so even though that's a resisted hit, you still take this Garchomp down to about half.
Right, Garchomp taking a lot of damage there. These Garchomps are not as bulky as they were about a month ago. Trying to invest a little bit more in speed, but the speed is going to be helpful here because it means if Whimsicott can match the Tailwind, Garchomp should be moving before the Charizard. On the other side, can threaten really significant Rock Slide damage. Aerodactyl, on the other hand, has difficulty doing any damage back to Garchomp. There's no dual Wing Beat on this Aerodactyl, so it only has resisted Rock Slide to go back with. And so Garchomp pretty well positioned here. Charizard going to have to get out of harm's way.
Still did a lot of damage, though, before you are expecting to have to take a return attack. Sylveon is going to be the defensive switch of choice to have to take that Rock Slide or maybe even a Dragon-type attack. But Aerodactyl still gets to use Rock Slide first, naturally faster than this Garchomp. It's able to land on both targets, and we know that Rock Slide has a 30% chance to flinch, so Garchomp can't move this turn.
Flinch it does. I want to call one dynamic out from that last turn. Aerodactyl was also threatening Wide Guard that could have blocked the Rock Slide, and so you might think that means Garchomp is going to Dragon Claw, which makes the Sylveon switch even more potent there, but instead, we never find out what Garchomp was going to do because it just flinches through the turn, and now Sylveon is in a great position. Not having to worry about being KO'd here, doesn't matter the speed. If it manages to get a Hyper Voice off, that will just be 2 KOs into Garchomp and Whimsicott. So similar to that first turn, it's very difficult, even though you can move first, get some damage off, it's difficult to go for that, and so Whimsicott having to get out into the back, get Kingambit on the field instead.
And Aerodactyl protecting itself, so there's no Wide Guard on this turn, and there's not even additional offense. This Garchomp is going to do the same. With that Sylveon across the way, it does not want to feint on this turn, and Kingambit is the perfect switch in to have to take this Hyper Voice.
So these switches keep putting Emilio back into the threatening position, but keep giving up a lot of health in the meantime. So Kingambit comes onto the field, takes a big chunk of its health bar, but is now threatening Iron Head back into Sylveon in a way that means Sylveon can't just comfortably click Hyper Voice again. But if Marco can keep kind of repositioning at a lesser cost than Emilio is having to spend for his reposition, eventually he's going to take a lead. You can see Garchomp took so much damage from the Heat Wave because of the first reposition. And already the Wide Guard down, trying to block the damage on the other side.
It just takes one turn, and Emilio is going to miss a window of opportunity because of that Wide Guard. Rock Slide doesn't come out. Sylveon still gets to move first before this Kingambit, knocks out the Garchomp, and just barely misses the KO onto that opposing threat. So Kingambit can still weave in an attack here. It's going to be the Iron Head, a super effective attack into the Sylveon, but that Sylveon training, wow, he loves Marco so much to hang on through that.
Crucial that the Rock Slide was blocked would have been the extra damage against Sylveon. The Tailwind now expires just on Marco's side, though. Remember that he clicked Tailwind a turn earlier than the Whimsicott did, and so now the Kingambit should be moving before the Sylveon. Of course, Floette moving before either thing on the other side, and Kingambit has Sucker Punch pressure as well. So this is a turn for Emilio to go out on the offense, but it's very easy for Marco to defuse it, has Double Protect available to kill that last turn of Tailwind, which would make Aerodactyl the fastest thing on the field once again, and it's also pretty easy to set up Tailwind again here. Even in Tailwind, Aerodactyl, even in Tailwind for Kingambit, Aerodactyl will be moving first, so you can always get access to that next Tailwind, and that Charizard is looking to be a problem in the future for Emilio.
There's not really a great way to punish a Double Protect here either. Since this Floette doesn't have a setup option in Calm Mind, there isn't really something that you can do that is valuable if the Pokemon are going to be both protecting. And so we do see the Mega Evolution here from the Floette, and the Whimsicott switches in, but Sylveon doesn't even protect itself. It just goes for an attack into the Whimsicott. I was really hoping that that quick attack would have dealt the finishing blow to that Kingambit, but it switched out. Dazzling Gleam is going to pick off the Sylveon and also chip down this Aerodactyl, and what could have been a passive turn from Marco ends up being a Tailwind turn.
I think this was a really smart turn from Marco. Could have fallen into a trap pretty easily there. You said there wasn't much to take advantage of a Double Protect turn, but there was. The Whimsicott coming in and threatening Encore would have been a huge problem if you had Double Protected, but Marco covers for that. He wants Aerodactyl to not protect and go for Tailwind, but he doesn't want to risk losing the Aerodactyl in the meantime. If you take a Dazzling Gleam and an Iron Head, your Aerodactyl just goes down. So the quick attack helps cover for that. If Kingambit tries to stay in and go after damage on Aerodactyl, the quick attack will just take it out. So while you give up Sylveon in this process, you successfully get yourself a Tailwind and don't end up in a back-footed position. Now Charizard comes in an excellent position here. Its #1 enemy, Garchomp, is already down on the other side. Floette having to protect itself because the damage is coming.
Now Whimsicott can use a Tailwind here, but that's probably the last move it's clicking in this first game, as there is an option for a Rock Slide on the Aerodactyl, as well as a follow-up of a Heat Wave from this Charizard. Rock Slide's gonna do it though. Don't even need to see a second attack from the partner on Marco's side to get that knockout and bring in Emilio's final Pokemon. That Kingambit has no choice except to come in the face of this Charizard.
No choice but to come in front of Charizard, and no choice to protect on the following turn either. Can get out a Sucker Punch and get some valuable chip in, but things are looking really difficult for Emilio at this point. Marco has all of the tools it seems like he'll need, and has one unrevealed Pokemon yet to show that can still help close out this position. Aerodactyl has to be a little bit worried here about Sucker Punch coming in, but can of course just wide guard. It makes it really difficult for Emilio to capitalize on this turn because you can't Sucker Punch as easily, you can't Dazzling Gleam as easily, but no wide guard, just Rock Slide, immediately the damage back.
Wow, Rock Slide is going to just narrowly miss out on this Kingambit, but you still have the chance to flinch a Pokemon on the other side. But Floette's gonna fire off a Light of Ruin, a super powerful attack into the Charizard that already took that damage from the Sucker Punch, but it doesn't pick up the knockout. Floette's gonna have to take 50% of recoil back, and it still has to take an attack from this Charizard. Double connect of the Heat Wave is going to send Kingambit and Floette packing, and Marco Silva takes game 1.
You could see Marco breathe a sigh of relief in the player cam there. Maybe wasn't thinking about the Sucker Punch Light of Ruin double up as a possibility after the Rock Slide didn't pick up the KO on Kingambit. If that had been a KO back into Charizard, things might have looked a little bit risky there depending on what the last Pokemon was, but Charizard has just the training it needs, hangs on with 4 hit points, and gets the game-winning Heat Wave.
Let's take a look back at some of the plays that happened in that first game. It was really that positioning masterclass, especially when Emilio felt like he was on the back foot at the start of the game. He needed to find the right window to actually weave in attacks from this Floette. Use that Mega Evolution after getting caught off guard by that Aerodactyl Charizard lead.
Right, I think that's the key moment. In a matchup like this that can be so damage trading back and forth, if you have the disadvantage in the lead position, it can be really difficult to recover. Marco immediately had damage threat with Charizard and Aerodactyl on turn 1, and then was able to reset it after Emilio's reposition, so that now Sylveon was threatening the offense. And it was really just those 2 hits that he needed, the Heat Wave into the force of the Garchomp on the field, and then the Hyper Voice into the Kingambit a couple of times to bust this game open and take a pretty clean game 1 win.
I wonder what Marco had brought in the back. That's gonna be a mystery that serves Marco a bit of an advantage, I would think.
Right, because if it had been Garchomp, which is good into a lot of Pokemon, that would be all the more reason to have focused on Floette. But if it wasn't Garchomp and you're not worried about Garchomp on the other side, then maybe it's easier to go to Charizard. For now, Emilio isn't going to show us which Mega he's chosen, instead just Whimsicott and Basculete.
And we do see a switch up from Marco on the other side. He's got the Farigiraf and Incineroar, but maybe Trick Room on the table.
Trick Room certainly a possibility here. You can Trick Room a little more safely in front of Whimsicott with Farigiraf than most setters, because you don't have to worry about the Encore on the following turn, because Armor Tail will still prevent it. Meanwhile, Incineroar finds a pretty good spot, getting to intimidate the Basculegion on the other side. Does have to worry about water offense back into Incineroar, depending on how it's trained. We looked at how Incineroar had the plus attack stat alignment, had the plus attack item, may not be as bulky, may not be wanting to take a Wave Crash in this position.
We do see a switch out of both Pokemon, the Kingambit coming in for the Whimsicott, and the Sylveon now coming in for that Incineroar. That Sylveon's gonna have to take this Wave Crash, which does a considerable amount of damage. We can see how that Intimidate drop from the Incineroar helped out a lot. As Farigiraf gets away with a Trick Room, we're off to the races.
Trick Room down means that the Sylveon will be moving before the Basculegion, but it isn't as clear for the Kingambit on the other side. We don't know, I don't think the speed relationship between the two yet, and so if the Kingambit can take advantage of this Trick Room that just came up, it's in a really strong position. We already saw that Hyper Voice is not a 2-hit KO. It can swing into Farigiraf for a ton of damage, into Sylveon for a ton of damage, and we know Incineroar is in the back, so it's difficult to reposition there because you would just give over a Defiant boost. So that turn 1 Kingambit switch as Trick Room goes up looks like it's so valuable here. And Sylveon takes so much damage from that Wave Crash. It was -1, but it didn't look like it. So much damage back.
Well, we know for sure that Farigiraf is the slowest Pokemon on this field for now, as Sylveon actually moving before this Kingambit gets the knockout onto the Basculegion, and then the Kingambit is able to move next. Iron Head into the Sylveon, picks it off, and it's a 1-for-1 Pokemon trade on this second turn.
So Sylveon moving first in Trick Room, really important for Marco there because it finishes off the KO into Basque Legion and gets really good damage into King Gambit, but Sylveon does have to get traded back, goes down to Iron Head in the meantime. That's not always what you're looking for in Trick Room, and the King Gambit still stays a really big problem, pretty healthy here, and Incineroar are going to be forced back out on the field, probably moving before the King Gambit on the other side, but has to give up a Defiant boost in the meantime.
You at least have Fake Out for one turn. But I think the other thing about this Incineroar is you've got kind of two pretty difficult targets. At this position, does Flare Blitz with the Charcoal boost from the Incineroar actually knock out the King Gambit?
Oh, certainly. It probably comes close to one-hit KOing the King Gambit.
With the Aqua Berry.
Oh, the Aqua Berry is going to reduce the damage quite a bit. Yeah, you're right. That would create a problem. If you have it, you probably don't have Aerodactyl as a way to unnerve that berry in the back. Based on what we've seen so far, you'd expect it to be Charizard as the last Pokemon, but the Sun Boost, if you can get to that position in a couple of turns, you of course can't switch it in because you have to Mega Evolve, would be a problem. But for now, Whimsicott coming in to where it might be the Flare Blitz slot. The Focus Sash will help it take it, but only the Focus Sash.
Yeah, you could see a double up of a Psychic from the Farigiraf to finish off the Whimsicott if that's the case. But first things first, Floette, Mega Evolving. Incineroar moves next. It is going to be the Flare Blitz to bring that Whimsicott down to its Focus Sash, but a secondary attack from this Farigiraf would be able to do the trick. Interesting as well that the Incineroar is actually slower than the Farigiraf in Trick Room, as we see the Psychic actually go into the Floette instead.
Yeah, the Incineroar the only Pokemon on this team with the minus speed alignment, and so moving even before the Farigiraf here.
Moonblast is not going to be able to pick up the Incineroar, but it's so close that I feel like this is just an easy Dazzling Gleam angle, and Trick Room is almost over.
And the other thing it means is that you have one more Flare Blitz. Unless that Flare Blitz is into Whimsicott, the recoil on any other target is going to take Incineroar down. So while you can threaten a ton of damage into the Floette on the other side, you'd be giving up Charizard in the process.
Well, Marco might be giving up his Incineroar here. So let's see the Flare Blitz. I was actually going to be into the Floette. Would have loved to be able to land that attack while you still had that speed advantage. But it's going to be a Flare Blitz into a Protect and a Psychic into a Dark-type King Gambit.
A great turn for killing one turn of Trick Room here, getting a Protect and an Immune switch in. Marco showing that he's willing to trade the Floette for the Incineroar. Incineroar trying to get a Flare Blitz. It might have been enough damage to KO the Floette, probably is, but would have taken Incineroar down in the meantime. Interesting prioritization. Like you might not expect that that's the key thing if you have Charizard in the back. So for Emilio's shoes, you're trying to figure out what that fourth Pokemon is, and you're trying to use signals based on the targeting to understand that. It could be, though, that it was just the vulnerable thing. If you know that you're putting Psychic into Whimsicott, then the other place to put damage, if you're not trying to cover for the King Gambit switch, is just to make sure and put some targeting into Floette for that turn, even if it's likely to protect.
Well, it's going to be the King Gambit as the next revolving door of Pokemon resumes. Got the Whimsicott now going to take its place as Farigiraf protects itself. This Pokemon is still full HP. Farigiraf is not taking any damage yet as the Flare Blitz goes into the Whimsicott and finishes it off for good in the second game. I wonder if this Farigiraf just protected itself from something like a Light of Ruin. Let's find out as the Floette is going to just use Moonblast. That's a great protect for the Farigiraf.
Great Protect from the Farigiraf keeps it healthy enough to likely set a second Trick Room if it wants it, because it'd be very dangerous to not put any targeting into the Incineroar on the other side. Maybe Dazzling Gleam plus Kowtow just picks up the Farigiraf. So you have to be watching out for that. But Incineroar really difficult, in a really difficult spot now, likely moving after King Gambit and Floette without Trick Room up. It's such low health that it's just kind of waiting to be KO'd by Dazzling Gleam. Really crucial now at this point what that last Pokemon is for Marco. If it's Charizard, it probably comes in and just has a really nice time cleaning up this game. If it's not Charizard, I'm not sure any of the other Pokemon can accomplish it.
Let's find out. Incineroar is going to take a reprieve, and Charizard now on the field. Marco's Mega Evolution has to come in and take this Dazzling Gleam, as that's going to also be spread damage into the Farigiraf, and the King Gambit's able to follow that up with a Kowtow Cleave. A big priority here for Emilio. Actually gets a critical hit into the Charizard to knock it out. But does that mean the Farigiraf is able to get something done on this turn? Trick Room. Wow, Marco had to give up his Charizard for Trick Room.
Yeah, wow, this is such an interesting turn. So a huge risk taken from Marco there, probably expecting that it's kowtow into the Frigoraph, trying to block the Trick Room, and so you get Charizard in for free and tries to preserve the Incineroar to have Incineroar next to Charizard on the following turn. But instead, Emilio makes the really smart play, gets the kowtow cleave into Charizard. May have also needed the critical hit on that kowtow cleave to actually clean up the KO into Charizard, but now things look really difficult for Marco because yes, you have Trick Room up. Both of your Pokemon are going to move first, but Incineroar is such low health, can probably go down to Sucker Punch here. There's no Sucker Punch. Armor Tail would protect that, but you actually have the damage with his Flare Blitz.
Let's see if the Aqua Berry can help it out here, and it doesn't. Kingambit goes down without a fight as the Incineroar uses the Flare Blitz.
But this trades back Incineroar. Can Frigoraph realistically win a damage trade back and forth with Floette?
Its only move is Psychic, so potentially you're able to get this in a couple of turns, but Psychic first, it looks like it's going to take about 4 Psychics to get this job done.
Certainly not going to take 4 Moonblasts. No. I think Floette is going to be able to clean this up.
Citrus Berry, though, is going to make sure this Frigoraph for sure stays around for the next, now, but...
I don't know, that last Moonblast looked like one more Moonblast is plenty of damage. I'm not even sure a critical hit Psychic cleans it up. For now, Floette, though, just going to protect itself.
Just have to make sure that you're going through the motions here. Emilio knows that this game is all but locked up, and you want to take this time to actually think about how you're going to approach Game 3.
Right. You want to find what the next path is going to be, how you recreate the success from Game 1.
Trick Room looked really great here from Marco, but Emilio played through that with such smart defensive switches, as he tried to do in that first game, but just had too much damage going his way.
A lot of times if you're playing against Trick Room, even when it's not a Trick Room team, but a team that decides to go into its Trick Room mode, it's all about what you do on that first turn without Trick Room. Are you ready to pounce as soon as the Trick Room falls? And Emilio was in that position. Had the Incineroar so low on the other side. And one thing I want to call out about that kowtow cleave targeting as well is that if Incineroar had stayed in, Dazzling Gleam would have KO'd Incineroar, which could not protect itself. The kowtow cleave would have just redirected into the Frigoraph and picked up that KO anyway. So there was no risk of targeting it into the Charizard slot. You would have gotten the damage into Frigoraph one way or another. So just a smart play, be ready to be on top and capitalize on Trick Room expiring.
I also wonder maybe what would have happened if Marco had actually used Flare Blitz into the Whimsicott slot, even if it was at 1 HP. Would have caught that Kingambit on the switch in, and then it's just down to Whimsicott and Floette.
Right, on that, you're talking about the turn where Floette protected itself and Whimsicott cycled out to Kingambit to take the Psychic. A lot of times from the Trick Room side, you really have to make sure you capitalize on all 4 turns of Trick Room that you have. And then if the opponent can successfully disrupt it with the right switches and right protects, it almost always feels like in a close Trick Room game, you can point back to one turn during that Trick Room where if the targeting had been different, then it all works out. And this game is no different. If that had been Flare Blitz and Psychic as a double up into Whimsicott, then you probably take this home for Marco. So yeah, definitely not enough evidence to say the Trick Room mode is impossible, but also from Marco's shoes, you don't have to go back to it. You won Game 1 without Trick Room. You can just go back to Aerodactyl once again.
And that's what we're going to see. It's going to be the Aerodactyl and the Sylveon from Marco as leads in this Game 3, and back to the Basculegion and Whimsicott for Emilio.
Basculegion and Whimsicott are a lot more stable in this position than the Floette we saw in Game 1 was against Aerodactyl. Like, not at too much damage risk here. You can, Tailwind and Hyper Voice to get damage into Basculegion, but you're not threatening a KO. Maybe Rock Slide plus Hyper Voice is threatening a KO, but then you're not getting the speed control. Basculegion should be moving before Sylveon in that situation. And Moonblast, we saw the Wave Crash damage at -1. Wave Crash might just be a one-hit KO against Sylveon. So if you're not getting speed control, you're not necessarily getting to attack with Sylveon. And certainly if Wave Crash on its own is not enough to pick up the KO, Moonblast plus Wave Crash is enough to pick up that KO. So a pretty difficult position here for Marco, because then you might think about, like, do I protect Sylveon and just get Tailwind that way? Well, then you're in all sorts of encore risk, and you might be vulnerable to a double up into the Aerodactyl slot.
Well, one thing's for sure, this Whimsicott can guarantee the Tailwind, and the Basculegion follows that up with the Wave Crash. That is a one-hit knockout into the Sylveon. That Intimidate did matter in that second game, and so Sylveon's not going to be able to accomplish anything on this turn except recoil damage over to the Basculegion. Aerodactyl lets loose a Rock Slide, misses out the Basculegion, but does get connection onto the Whimsicott.
In a pretty disastrous turn 1 for Marco. A difficult lead position leads to a poor turn 1. Then the rock slide miss adds the cherry on top to make this a pretty difficult position. Is kind of scared away from Tailwind there because of the threat of Encore on future turns. Wants to get rock slide, break the focus ash, chip damage into Basket Legion. Is not willing to protect the Sylveon and try to keep it safe, and so just lets it go down really simply there. Just a lot of free damage from Emilio's side. Now Garchomp comes in and is at risk. We talked about the Garchomps becoming faster. That means that they're less bulky. The Whimsicott on the other side holding Focus Sash may mean it's more offensively trained. Could just be immediately threatening a Moonblast KO here. And even if that's not enough on its own, Basket Legion can certainly finish that KO. And then you aren't necessarily guaranteed Tailwind if you want it right now either. Whimsicott and Basket Legion can both just move before that Aerodactyl and pick up the KO there. And that's the first target. Aqua Jet all the way into 1 HP on Aerodactyl.
Yeah, that Focus Sash is going to be very handy here. It's why we like to see that item sometimes over the Aerodactylite. But Moonblast from this Whimsicott gets to follow up and confirm that KO. A double up into this Aerodactyl means no Tailwind, no speed control. Marco is down to his final 2 Pokemon in this game. This is free and clear to go for this Earthquake, but Whimsicott and Basket Legion are going to need another one in order to get knocked out.
Right, the Earthquake just isn't impactful enough at this point in time to be giving up Aerodactyl and trade for it. Marco forced into that position because of the pressure that Emilio has, but you haven't done anything to solve the threats on the other side. Garchomp still very threatened. Charizard now threatened as well. Even in the sun, a Wave Crash is going to do a ton of damage over to Charizard, and there's no matched Tailwind, so Marco's Pokemon are both going to be moving after the 2 on the other side. I think a really crucial turn of Protect here. If you can successfully get Garchomp out to attack without a Moonblast coming into it, you're maybe starting to come back. If Marco can protect Charizard from an attack, it's really important. But for now, just the Basket Legion actually going to protect itself, and Encore going to lock that Garchomp into Earthquake.
Possible there is a Garchomp sneaking around in the back, or even that Charizard that would be immune to that Earthquake. And now you have a couple of turns now. You're going to need to try to fight through that. Whimsicott eating the dust is actually going to give a free switch here for Emilio to still take advantage of these final couple of turns of Trick Room, or of Tailwind.
To some extent, there's smart plays from Emilio's side about limiting your opponent's options. If you're really trying to capitalize on your Tailwind, you want to take away the guessing game of the targeting on the other side. And so by encoring the Garchomp, if it had protected on that turn, that means that Floette knows it can just target Garchomp because it can't successfully protect guaranteed the next turn. If you encore into Earthquake, then it can't protect itself. Either way, you know that you can land the Floette offense into Garchomp on this next turn and continue to simplify the game. Instead of playing the guessing game about targeting, Emilio just finds a way to lock in one more KO and continue to simplify this. When you have a big 4-2 lead like Emilio had, finding ways to take the guessing games out of it is so important. Emilio did a great job at that here.
There's still going to be Mega Evolution on the table for Marco, and it's just going to be a Mega Evolution and Protect. You know that this Basket Legion is still threatening with things like that Wave Crash, so it can help take a little bit of that work out, but a one-hit knockout into the Garchomp. This Charizard's going to have 3 Pokemon to get through if it wants to bring Marco Silva this first round victory.
Garchomp, of course, could not protect itself on this turn because it was encored into Earthquake. An Earthquake it would have loved to land, would have been a KO into Basket Legion, a bunch of damage into Floette, but there was no opportunity to make that happen. Tailwind making sure that Floette can move first and just KO Garchomp, and now it's Charizard against the world. 3 Pokemon on the other side for Emilio. Charizard's going to have its work cut out for it.
A Protect for the Floette keeps itself safe on this turn, and the Basket Legion as well. Don't want to take any risks here to try to stall out as many turns of the Sun as possible. If for some reason something unusual happens, like a critical hit.
Right, still have to be watching out. Floette's going to get some damage back. Basket Legion might be able to get some damage back with Aqua Jet, but it's not like you're going to immediately threaten a KO here.
Yeah, I mean, the Moonblast can still do a lot, and so that's where Floette's going to take advantage of that Fairy Aura, get a nice chunk into that Charizard, but it takes 1 more in order to secure that knockout. So can Charizard actually do enough work here while it still has both Pokemon, and that Floette is very close to getting knocked out. The critical hit going to make that blow even softer on the next turn.
Yeah, you almost asked for it there with the critical hit, but Floette should be able to just move first, and the sucker punch will be enough to make sure that that cleans up the KO. And so Emilio's lead is big enough to withstand that critical hit. Floette bulky enough to withstand that critical hit, and Marco didn't have enough to take down Emilio in this round one.
Look, even if the Floette had gone down there, sucker punch almost certainly finishes up the job. And congratulations to Emilio Forbes for winning the first round of the North America International Championships for 2026.
Such great adjustments, was back-footed on turn one, game one, and never could recover in game one.